On March 13, 2026, a U.S. Air Force KC-135 tanker lifted off from a base in Saudi Arabia. Its destination was classified. Its mission was classified. The bomber it was about to refuel over the Gulf was classified. None of that mattered. A Chinese AI firm was already watching. By the time that tanker reached its refueling point over the Strait of Hormuz, a company called Mizar Vision had logged its position, cross-referenced it with known strike patterns, annotated the probable bomber trajectory, and posted the analysis publicly on X and Weibo for anyone on Earth to read, including Iran. In the days that followed, several of the assets Mizar Vision had publicly mapped appeared on Iran's target list for its next missile and drone strike package. The U.S. Navy was fighting the most significant naval campaign since the Second Gulf War. China was watching every move. And the question nobody in the press room asked is the same one this video is going to answer. Why did the Navy let it? Subscribe to the channel. We do not cover what happened. We explain why it was allowed to happen. And in this case, the answer involves a 30,000-ton floating supercomputer, a shadow fleet running on spoofed transponders, and a leverage equation that 3 carrier strike groups cannot solve. China's surveillance role at Hormuz during Operation Epic Fury was not one thing. It was 4 simultaneous operations running in parallel, each one different in method, each one pointing to the same strategic conclusion. Understanding why the Navy did not move to stop any of them requires understanding what each one actually was. Mizar Vision is a private geospatial intelligence company incorporated in Hangzhou and operating out of Shanghai. It is not a military organization. It does not claim government affiliation. It publishes its analysis openly on social media. It joined X on February 24, 2026, 4 days before Operation Epic Fury began. By the time the first Tomahawk left its tube, Mizar Vision was already posting annotated, high-resolution satellite imagery of U.S. military assets across the Middle East. What it built was a system for tracking U.S. military movements using entirely public data. The foundation is ADS-B, Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, the same signal system commercial aircraft use to broadcast their positions to air traffic control. Military bombers suppress their ADS-B signals during operational flights. Military tankers do not. The tanker has to find the bomber. The tanker has to broadcast to do that, and every ADS-B signal is publicly accessible. Mizar Vision took those tanker signals, fed them into an AI model trained to correlate refueling patterns with known bomber operational profiles, and produced movement analysis that mapped the operational geometry of an entire air campaign. Here is the detail that makes this story more uncomfortable, not less. Mizar Vision does not own a single satellite. Every image it processed and published was sourced from commercial providers, including Western ones. According to Sat News and Flight Global, the high-resolution imagery Mizar Vision annotated came primarily from Vantor, formerly Maxar Intelligence, at 0.3-meter resolution, and Planet Labs for maritime wide swath coverage. Both are American companies. The satellites that exposed U.S. military positions at Hormuz were partly American and European. The AI that annotated and weaponized that imagery was Chinese, and the beneficiary of the intelligence was Iranian. According to Flight Global's reporting, assets cataloged by Mizar Vision and posted publicly on X included F-22 stealth fighters at Israel's Ovda Air Base, E-3 AWACS command and control aircraft at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, KC-46 tankers, P-8 maritime patrol jets, and the movement track of USS Gerald R. Ford as it transited from Crete toward the eastern Mediterranean. One release cataloged approximately 2,500 individual U.S. military assets across the region. This was not espionage, No classified systems were accessed. No laws were broken. Every data point MizarVision used was publicly available. That is the problem. The vulnerability MizarVision exploited is not new. The U.S. military has known about it for years. Refueling tankers, the KC-135 and KC-46 are the circulatory system of every extended air campaign. Without them, the bombers cannot reach their targets. Without them, the fighters cannot sustain patrol cycles. Without them, the carrier air wing cannot project power beyond its immediate area. The tankers broadcast. That is how they function. A bomber flying without ADS-B in a region full of commercial air traffic needs its tanker to be findable. So the tanker announces itself. What MizarVision demonstrated is that an adversary with commercial satellite imagery, publicly available ADS-B data, and a sufficiently trained AI model can reconstruct the operational geometry of an entire air campaign from open sources. The bombers were invisible, the tankers were not, and the tankers drew the map. There is one more layer to this. The 2026 Iran War Wikipedia record notes that part of the U.S. pre-war deception involved deliberately leaking false information about F-22 deployments to conceal where preparations were actually most advanced. The U.S. was running its own disinformation through open-source channels, the exact same channels MizarVision was monitoring and publishing, which means the information environment around this war was simultaneously a deception arena and a surveillance arena, running in parallel, with no clean boundary between them. The equation the Navy cannot easily solve is not simply turning off the tanker signal. It is untangling a public information space that its own deception operations depend on from the same public information space its adversary is reading in near real time. While MizarVision tracked from a server room, China's physical surveillance operation was already positioned in international waters off Oman. The Liaowang-1 is a signals intelligence vessel commissioned by the People's Liberation Army Navy in April 2025. It displaces approximately 30,000 tons. It is 224 meters long. Its sensor architecture includes a surveillance envelope estimated at 6,000 kilometers, sufficient to cover the entire Arabian Sea, the Persian Gulf, and large sections of the broader Middle East simultaneously. According to Defense Security Asia's analysis of the deployment, the ship is capable of tracking approximately 1,200 aircraft and missile trajectories simultaneously. Its onboard processing capacity led one unnamed American analyst to describe it to the publication as a floating supercomputer processing petabytes of data to map the invisible battlefield. Defense analysts noted its objectives include analyzing the operational frequencies of F-22 and F-35 stealth fighters and EA-18 Growler electronic warfare aircraft, data directly useful for optimizing the effectiveness of ground-based air defense systems. Whether that data was shared with Iranian commanders is unconfirmed in open sources. That the data was collected is not in dispute. The Liaowang-1 did not arrive alone. It was escorted by a Type 055 guided missile cruiser and a Type 052D destroyer, a protective formation that signals not a research mission but a structured intelligence operation requiring naval defense. China deployed its most capable surface combatants to ensure its surveillance ship could operate without interruption in a live war zone. All of it in international waters, all of it legal, all of it watching. The U.S. Navy's options for responding to a Chinese intelligence ship operating lawfully in international waters during a war with Iran are narrow. Moving to interfere with a Chinese naval formation, including a cruiser and a destroyer, during an active campaign against Iran risks opening a second front that no one in Washington wants. The Liaowang-1 knew that. The escort knew that. That is why they were there. China's 48th Escort Fleet, based out of Djibouti, added a third layer. The formation, guided missile destroyer Tangshan, frigate Daking, and supply vessel Taihu, moved from its Gulf of Aden patrol area toward the approaches of the Arabian Sea as epic fury intensified. The Taihu, a Type 903A replenishment vessel, gave the formation the endurance to remain on station indefinitely without returning to port. Chinese state media described the deployment as routine anti-piracy escort operations, the same justification Beijing has used for its Djibouti-based naval presence since 2017. Defense analysts noted the timing was not routine. The fleet's geographic position placed it within observation range of U.S. naval operations at the Gulf's eastern approaches. More importantly, it provided China with something the Liaowang 1 could not, a physical naval presence that Iran's government and the IRGC could point to as evidence of Chinese interest in the conflict's outcome. Iran's blockade explicitly exempted Chinese-flagged vessels. Chinese-owned tankers transited the strait under arrangements Iran honored, even as it fired on Western shipping. The 48th Fleet was the visible manifestation of the relationship that made those exemptions possible. Here is where the 3 carrier strike groups, the 21 warships, the 100-plus aircraft, and the 10,000 personnel become strategically insufficient. China purchases approximately 90% of Iran's total crude oil exports under the 2021 Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, a 25-year agreement covering energy, infrastructure, and security cooperation. Iran's economy is structurally dependent on Chinese demand. The International Monetary Fund pegs Iran's fiscal break-even at between $121 and $124 per barrel. China pays Iran approximately $60 per barrel after discount. Iran was running budget deficits before the first Tomahawk fired. The rial had lost 15% of its value in the month before Epic Fury began. Iran cannot sustain a war, rebuild its military, or negotiate from strength without Chinese money continuing to flow. Beijing did not need to fire a weapon. It did not need to board a ship. It did not need to challenge a carrier strike group. It held the one piece of leverage that determines whether Iran can outlast American pressure, and it chose, deliberately, not to use it. That decision is not neutral. Choosing not to use leverage in a crisis is itself a strategic act. Beijing watched the U.S. destroy Iran's navy, watched the blockade tighten, watched ceasefire negotiations collapse in Islamabad on April 11th, and continued buying Iranian crude at discount prices, sustaining the exact economic foundation that allows Tehran to refuse American terms. The Fifth Fleet cannot make the phone call to Tehran that Beijing can. No carrier reposition changes that arithmetic. This brings us back to the question in the title: why did the Navy let China watch? The answer is not weakness. It is a constraint set that has no clean solution. Moving against Mizar Vision requires moving against a private company publishing open-source analysis using publicly available data, including data from American satellites. The legal framework for interdicting that does not exist under international law, and sanctioning a firm that processes American commercial imagery creates a precedent that reaches directly back to the U.S. companies that sold it. Moving against the Liaowang 1 requires confronting a Chinese naval formation, cruiser, destroyer, intelligence ship, operating lawfully in international waters. The military and diplomatic cost of that confrontation during an active campaign against Iran exceeds any tactical benefit from removing one surveillance asset. Moving against the 48th Fleet requires the same calculus. China has not fired a weapon. China has not violated international law. Every action Beijing has taken during Epic Fury falls within the boundaries of behavior that the existing rules-based order explicitly permits, and moving against China's economic relationship with Iran, the fourth operation, the one that actually matters, requires a willingness to impose secondary sanctions on Chinese banks and Chinese entities during a period when the U.S. is simultaneously managing a trade war with Beijing. That decision sits in the White House, not the Pentagon. And as of May 3, 2026, it has not been made. The Navy did not let China watch because it had no response. It let China watch because every available response carried a cost that exceeded the benefit of the action. That is not the same thing as having no problem. Here is what this video cannot verify. Flight Global's reporting confirmed that assets Mizar Vision publicly identified were subsequently targeted by Iran. and stated explicitly that it is unclear whether the Chinese imagery was used by Tehran to support its strike targeting. The correlation is documented. The direct causal link is not confirmed in open sources, and this video will not claim otherwise. We cannot confirm the precise intelligence value China extracted from the Liaowang-1's sensor data, or whether that data was shared directly with Iranian targeting officers. What we can confirm is that the ship was on station. Its objectives included analysis of U.S. stealth aircraft frequencies, and it operated under naval escort designed to protect a high-value intelligence mission. We cannot verify whether Mizar Vision operates with Chinese government direction or purely as a commercial entity. What is confirmed is that its posts were amplified by accounts linked to Chinese state-run media, and that the imagery it processed came partly from Western commercial satellite operators, a data supply chain no government planned for and no law currently governs. The connection between surveillance and targeting opportunity is documented. The chain between Beijing's choices and Tehran's endurance is documented. The rest is inference, clearly labeled as such. 3 U.S. carrier strike groups, 21 warships, over 11,000 targets struck. Iran's surface navy on the seabed, the most dominant naval force assembled since 2003, and throughout every day of that campaign, a Chinese AI firm was publishing the positions of American aircraft using imagery from American satellites. A 30,000-ton Chinese intelligence ship was recording every signal from a 6,000-kilometer surveillance bubble in international waters off Oman. A Chinese naval formation was positioned at the Gulf's eastern approaches, and Chinese money kept Iran's government solvent. The Navy did not lose a ship. It did not lose the campaign. What it demonstrated involuntarily is that the most advanced naval force in human history operates inside an information environment it does not fully control, and against an economic relationship it cannot simply outgun. China was watching every move at Hormuz. The Navy let it because the alternatives were worse. That is not a comfort. That is a variable that does not disappear when this war ends. Subscribe to the channel. The next equation involves the same 4 players and a different strait.